I can remember me and my sister we went to a school, called St. Luke's. It was a Catholic school. Believe it or not, it was an interesting experience. And yeah, I remember walking one morning right on Lexington Parkway, and we're walking to school, and nigger, ha! We're like, what did we just hear? We just, Jimmy and sister, like that was just that little. I'm like, what was that about? And just, and we talk about it to this day, and going to a Catholic school and that whole thing, it was just really interesting. And us having, being only a few Black folks in there.
It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free. Welcome to another episode of Freedom Friday. It is Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you are freer after this hour with Sharif El-Mekki and me. And today we have a very special guest. But before we jump into that, I want to set up today's show because it is Black History Month, and we have committed ourselves in this month to thinking about Black futures, not Black history, because we are going somewhere as a people. And I think that we are good on knowing where we came from in a lot of ways. Not everybody, it's not perfect, but we really do need a plan for tomorrow. We very much need a plan for where we go. And when we look at our kids, we talk about education here all the time. When we look at our children, we're literally sending a message to the future every time we talk to them. Every time that we set up, anything we do for them, we're sending a message to the future. I don't think we think about it enough, which is why we made this Afrofutures month this year, and we wanted to switch it up a little bit. But one of the important things that will get us there, Afrofuturism is very much an artistic movement, and we don't often talk about the power of the arts when it comes to our revolution, when it comes to our forward-looking strategy that we should have. The arts play a very important part. So I said it. I would frame it out with two quick stories. Number one. 1987, I jumped on a bus and came to Minnesota, and I didn't really intend to, but I had to get out of California. There was just some things going on in life that made it necessary for me to leave. So I got a Greyhound bus. Took me 2 weeks to get to Minnesota. Every bus stop I got off on, I almost stayed. Like I almost stayed in Utah, I almost stayed in Omaha. But no, I had to get to Minnesota because everything was popping off at the time. Prince and Purple Rain and First Avenue. And there was all this stuff I needed to get here to Minnesota and see. And, of course, I had my guitar. I was going to be famous, right? I was going to do the thing. At that time, Prince was coming to Oakland and stealing all the musicians and taking them back to Minnesota. And he didn't take me, because I wasn't good. But anyway, so so I jumped on a bus and I came here. And over the years, I've had the interesting kind of experience of seeing lots of people that I had respect for in person. And one of those people is here with us today, Stokley Williams, better known as Stokley, longtime homeboy here in the Twin Cities. But the homeboy was done well, meaning he had the life many of us can only dream of, which is traveling the world, singing before audiences all over the world, being on stages with some of the greats of our time, and also keeping his cultural background intact, not getting into an industry and becoming bleached and whitewashed and having to lose himself. In fact, his last album is called Sankofa. So how much more grounded and real do you keep it than that?
Love that.
Stokley, welcome to the show, brother. I appreciate you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me, man. It's been a long time. Been kind of talking this out a little bit. Josh has been telling me, come on the podcast. I'm like, come on, ready, man. Absolutely, anything.
Well, every time I see someone like you, where I have to, first of all, I've learned so much about you over time, right? I saw you somewhere and you started playing drums, and I was like, this dude's a singer. Why is he playing drums? And not just playing them, like playing them well. And I was like, well, damn. I saw you somewhere else. It was for a Black History Month presentation. This is years ago. And Professor El-Kati here locally, for people who aren't from Minnesota, is our most revered kind of walking library when it comes to Black education, just like knowing where we come from as a people, and a walking library here. Turns out that's your father. I saw you at something, and both of you were on the stage at the same time, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. Now I understand where Stokley, of all names, comes from.
Right.
So I would love to just start at the beginning with that and talk about like what you learned growing up here both in your household and your school that helped prepare you for the life that you have now as a culturally solid artist. Would love to hear more about kind of like your formative years.
Well, yeah, from Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minnesota, St. Paul side, of course, and went to St. Paul Central, and that definitely helped formed me. But before that, growing up, and I call myself a revolutionary child, the time where all these things were Black consciousness was at an all-time high, pretty much, coming into the late 60s, and I was born in 67. And so there was a lot of things happening, by the time I was born. And so I was kind of born into that. And we were all changing our names, Black folks then, trying to feel closer to the culture, you know what I mean? And learning all this new information of where we came from, and, talking about so that we can get to the future that we know we should have. And so that all these things were surrounding me, both my parents, educators. And so I was surrounded by this international world, a lot of Africanisms, I'll call it, a lot of folks that were around the house at the time, all these continental Africans, from Kenya, west coast of Africa, and, Ethiopia and just South Africa and other places, the Middle East, so I had this very well-rounded, I didn't know at the time, I just, this great human beings, all these people would teach me things. My love for curry came into play, for all these different foods and smells and, looking at listening to the music and, looking at the art and all these different things and instruments. So I was surrounded by all these things. As a kid, you're looking for things. It's just like they were playthings. It was just like, wow, anything that is like strong imagery with colors, scent, smell, you just titillated by all these things. So, of course, I didn't put it together, till I got older. And of course, you get to a certain point, just forgive me from jumping here, and there are just so many things that, unless I'm asked these questions, I never start
do
thinking
it.
about. I forgot about that. It was a very rich time, a very beautiful time. So musically speaking, I was around my first introduction into music. My parents would go back and forth to Africa, go back to Ghana, and they would trade, artifacts with their clothes. They'd bring a bunch of stuff, and so continental Africans wanted to know us. We wanted to know where we came from, and that kind of thing. And so they also took a trip to the Bahamas, and they brought back these bongos they had on the wall, and they were kind of like they weren't really to be played. It was just kind of like, ambiance for the world.
Art. It was art.
Yeah, just art pieces. And as a lot of people have, they'll have some elephants or something in them. These were just bongos, And somehow I got up on the wall and just took them down and started playing. And I guess, my parents were asleep, and they got up. They were like, "What is that noise? What is that?" And my dad said it sounded like patterns. Like, what is somebody said, what's going on? Am I dreaming? He got up and saw me in there, and he rubbed his eyes and said, like, am I seeing what I'm saying? Because it sounded like someone that knew what they were doing is what he told me. Because I don't remember. And he's like, wow, this is really interesting. He had a friend from the Bahamas, from Panama, I'm sorry, who had this African dance troupe at the time called Aberdeenge. And all of them say, I had this kid, I don't know if it sounds good. It sounds good to me, but I don't know. I might be biased. And so the guy came by, and he's like, oh, you can play. He's quick. So I had my first gig at 3 at the First National Bank in Minneapolis. I can't remember, it's another building now. And I'm standing on top of this folded steel chair playing congas, because I wasn't tall enough. And there was a caption in the newspaper, big drum, tiny drummer. I still have the caption. And so that was my introduction into the world of music and, just the culture, our beautiful culture that we have. And from there, I was around at the time, there were poets, there were people playing in the park. So I continued that education through our culture. And it was just the most amazing thing. Just I was always learning these things. Didn't know that I was learning. It was basically, schooling me. And it was just amazing. All these amazing people. It was there was a place in St. Paul called the Inner City Youth League, and they had kids come there. They were learning, martial arts, visual arts. They had a studio in there. There was boxing. Did a little bit of that. And so kids would come here and they would just, first of all, have somewhere to go. But, as children, you have all this energy. Where do you put it? This was just the perfect place. And this is a thing that these are more centers like this that I know that we need, because I know what it did for me. And I go around the country and I see or recognize these places that they may have some of these places like that when I was younger. It's that's what we need to, they're learning some skills, but also, you don't know what you're learning, but it's positive, you know what I mean? And it's definitely culturally based. And so these things were what I was a part of. And at that center, there was another group I joined called Black Arts Midwest. And, percussion, drums, chants, things that were echoing rhythms and patterns of the motherland. So it was really, it was so much. My head was just exploding. And I kind of knew it at that time. By that time, I was about 8 or 9. And I was learning all these things. And, as they say, you catch them when they're young. And so I was a sponge at that time. I was around all these scholars and these musicians and all these artists. And so it really affected me in an amazing way. And I think I'm still trying to unpack all that stuff every day. I'm learning. So as you may bring some stuff out of me today, which is great, because sometimes I don't know it's there.
Yeah.
And it's just great. I have really fond memories. But I remember also too, it's interesting to speak about the moment where, as children, you become aware of yourself, and sometimes that's where you start to dim your light a little bit. So at the time, of course, I'm sure some of you can remember, here being Black in America, there was a moment too, probably 12, 13, you start to be, there's a different kind of awareness, you understand like there is racism, Black and white, and being called nigga and all that stuff. So I had all these people in this culturally rich around me. And there was a thing where it's like Black folks didn't like to be associated with Africa in no way. It's like, just, it's like, what, I know African, that it's like, it was just like that whole thing. And, folks go, oh, your dad's African. My dad's from Savannah, but even African, that'd be great. From Savannah, Georgia, like, but the fact that,
thanks for the compliment.
Absolutely. And so there was that happening. So we were trying to, at one point, I remember, it's like, man, I was a little conflicted by that. I was like, man, this is, I saw it a little differently, but of course you wanted to be accepted, part of the crowd, your crew, and that whole thing. So there was a little bit of that. At the same time, I definitely was proud of it. And I was thinking that, that you all don't really know what's going on, but at the same time wanting to be accepted, and that, like I said, that whole thing. And that was just an interesting time. And now I think it's like, man, how crazy is it that the world, this country had that effect on our, on our people to be like, no, I don't want to be associated, be like, you are that. And you don't even know it. It's just so powerful that what this thing has done, what this system has done to all of us, where it's like, no, I don't like me. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, this is you. This is everything that you do is that. It's a direct reflection. And, I had recently took a trip to Ghana. It just really put so many things together for me. Connections. I'm like, even still now, we have no idea what we're doing and why we do it. And I'm like, wow, it is just really amazing and a beautiful thing. So that's pretty much my, my grounding, my my infancy stages, beginning stages. I didn't know that I was halfway homeschooled as well. I thought everybody knew what I knew and was learning what I was learning, on
they
Saturdays.
Don't. And they didn't.
They still don't.
They still don't.
Right. I would come home and, there was always something. Pops would have me come up, read this article. I just, read this page, just this, and he's like, what do you think about that? And have me, I wasn't just reading words. He was like, what did you just read? I'm like, I don't know. And so that became a practice. And I'm like, wow, this is really, why am I doing this? It was just a time where it's like, you're young and you want to be outside playing. It's like, again, I gotta. So thankful for these moments, that I do the same thing with my kids, And it's like, look, I know you can thank me later. Just you hate it, I get it. And so I'm starting to see some returns now. They're like, somebody asked me a question and I actually knew it, Dad. I'm like, okay, there you go. Just brick by brick, you build it. And, that's where I was. And it just was a moment where, you're being a kid and you're learning all these things. And I'm just so thankful now because had I not had, that tutelage and just that, my parents were like a laser focused on their kids' education. They were not let up. To the point where they knew it's like, look, I know you don't care. I don't care if you don't like it. This is, that's matter of fact that you're not supposed to like it, but this is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm not here for you to like me like that right now. This is not that. I'm not your friend. This is my job to do that. So this is how my thing was painted. These were the parameters, and this is the grounding. And so here I am trying to plant some more seeds and share what I know, and through what I do, through what I call the vibration of sound, and through positivity, through love, and through my reflection, and I give it back out to everybody and see, if it resonates with them. If it doesn't, I think it's not for them right now. It's for the future. I don't look at it as, anything like that. And in my life right now, when I'm trying different things, it's more so about, it's not win or lose, it's win and learn. I'm just, that's what we do. It's part of the experience of life. And it's, you don't think of, don't be scared of anything, just try it, And so those things help give me that perspective, that life, if any of that makes any sense. I'm just bouncing around.
No, at all.
It makes 100% sense.
Like a ton of sense in so from the outside looking in, you never know what people got going on. You never know how they come to be who they are. And so it's good. Like conversations like this are good to demystify for people, especially people coming up, to see how people got to where they are, to see what's the grounding that they had, to try and trace their steps, because it's not something you always learn in school, right?
True.
And in your story, just listening to what you just said right now, you've always been unique to me. Like I haven't been able to place you for a long time. Like you're this kind of like really different, unique thing, story to tell. Very, very much like a model of something, because what you just said, this is what I heard. And Sharif, you can jump in on this too. But Minnesota is a very white place first. Let's just start with that. And Minnesota was whiter than it is
and not
now,
just from the
today,
snow,
as a matter of
right?
fact, not just the snow, not just the snow. This is like, I was shocked when I moved here. I was shocked by how white Minnesota was. And, it's changed a little bit, but back then, the lifestyle that you were living would have been a very unique lifestyle, for one. And then you enter the music business here, which if there is colorism in the world and in music, Minnesota was the capital of colorism.
Oh man,
when it comes to music, and especially back in the day in the 80s, it was very much a colorist capital here. So the idea that you would be inoculated, the idea that what you had going on at home would have you inoculated completely, and that you would, like the thing you said about people being ashamed of Africa or whatnot, that would never cross your mind to have that in your own situation, to me, says the power of that homeschooling. Like the power, like, your parents sent you off into the world. They sent you into schools and they sent you off into the world or whatnot, but they sent you with a good coat. You were wearing a pretty good jacket, right?
Right. Yeah.
Does that Does that resonate with you and make sense to you? I mean, especially now, even now you're a father, you're raising another generation, right? You're in between, you're sandwiched between what you grow up with and what you're having to do now.
Yeah. Very interesting.
I guess, if there is a question in there, how much of that are you doing now as a father?
And how hard is it in this context now, right? Which is in the 60s and the early 70s was different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there lies the question. There's the rub. So, because different time, I think we were wanting to do this back then, unity, Kwanzaa back in the day, we were celebrating, before it became popular. And so I think what happened is, just what happens in politics and, people are close-knit and then people feel crowded and then they move out to the suburbs and that kind of thing. And we became kind of disjointed and everybody's everywhere. Now you have to drive to the fun. You have to drive to the culture. I had no shortage of homies around to play, but literally 20, 50 around in our, 3-block radius, riding bikes, playing basketballs, playing tackle football in this concrete, all kind of stuff. And these were it was my socialization, So now I'm pretty close in the city, but it's like, for the education and everything, trying to get to, private schools and that kind of, which is, I would much rather my kids have like a public, educate, but it's tough. You got to look at what they're teaching, man. And there's no way they would have been where they are now. They wouldn't be ready for college. They just, we got to get the education piece. That's the only way forward. We got to have that because that's just it. And so I do the best that I can with what I know. And of course, I keep them around the grandparents, because they know more than I do. That's number one.
Yeah,
and I think too, I look at that as, also because I was a kid who sometimes they sent down south as well. That is something that we used to do.
Part of South?
Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah.
Yeah,
okay.
My father's from, and my mother's side is from Fort Dodge, Iowa. So just having that connection with your grandparents was something that we used to do. Because we're so disjointed and so disconnected, our, from, it's just not like what it used to be. So I think that's a strong, powerful family connection that is missed, the grandparents to pass that down. Because there's so many messages that you see from your parents and then your grandparents. You can kind of see that lineage and it's unspoken. Way more is caught than taught with children. It's like you can say it, but when you live it and do it, that's a different thing because they're like picking up your mannerisms. They pick it up with what you say, how you live.
Your responses, that intellectual and cultural genealogy, right? You can actually see it.
And you can, that's much more powerful sometimes than speaking at somebody, and show and prove, as they say. So I'm keeping them close to that, and of course, I see now that the wheels are spinning, especially with my son. He's like, okay, he's starting to put some things together. I can hear him become himself. He's starting to get it because he's pretty shy, but very observant. And I can tell he's a thinker. So, I had to learn. Everybody has different learning styles too. I had to learn how he learns. It's not like me. It's not like, he's like, I'll say something. He's like, and he's a very stoic look, I'm like, but did you hear what I said? He's like, I was teaching him math or something like, he's like, you understand what I'm saying? He was like, I'm thinking. I was like, oh, okay, got it.
Thinking about what you
got it. Okay,
I'll let
just
you
a different way, everybody's, I might be a little bit more animated and, so I was like, okay, got it. So, he's taking in the world a little bit differently and it's, with the technology, it's a blessing and a curse. It's great that we have this thing that makes, all these things, our lives easier, but, it is a distraction. It is unfortunate sometimes, just like that we spend so much time here and not, face to face, this is a good thing. This is a great tool the way we're using it today because what we're talking about, but there's just a lot of wasted energy, you know what I mean? And I do, thank God that both of my children are, I said, look, man, this thing, and I didn't get them phones too much later. My wife was like, well, get them the phone. It's easier for me to I was like, yeah, but no, not yet. And it's too early. That's a whole different thing I have to fight with,
How long did you wait?
Well, 10 was early for me. I think they must have been in their teens. So like because some kids have it like 9, 10. I'm like, it's just too early for me. I can't, So I think they were about 14, 13, something like that. So it's trying to fight it off, man.
It's a battle. I mean, it's like,
hard.
Especially, when, the peer influences. So,
oh man, when
you don't want your
everybody's
kid
got
to,
it
so
and you don't,
everybody's got it. And, you don't, as a parent, that kind of strikes at you a little bit. You don't want to be, you don't want to be the parent of that kid, right?
Yeah, I know. And I tried to think of like, what could I relate to? And I couldn't, because there was nothing like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
On the other side, it is, we use it as a tool for we can see where they are. You know what I mean? Because it's just a different day. It's like, I wanted them to have their own experience, like walking to school and everything. But then you got to think about that, because there's crazy stuff that's happening, right? People just snatching up kids, and you know what I mean? There's that. So it takes away that experience, and it makes me more nervous. And then I don't want that to make them nervous. Now, they would always say, I want to walk to school. So I'm glad they had that spirit in them, because they really wanted to do that. And I wanted them to have their own experience, because there's so many little things that you don't get. Have siblings walking together. I can remember me and my sister we went to a school, called St. Luke's. It was a Catholic school. Believe it or not, it was an interesting experience. And yeah, I remember walking one morning right on Lexington Parkway, and we're walking to school, and nigger, ha! We're like, what? Did we just hear? Like that was just that little. I'm like, what was that about? And just, we talk about it to this day, and going to a Catholic school and that whole thing. It was just really interesting. And us having, being only a few Black folks in there, and just what that was and what we were learning. So, I mean, I'm just saying all that to say that is a small thing, but a big thing in your life, and that you can take that and it can be a teachable moment, but that moment is not there for them to be had, because it's like you have these crazy things happening in the world. So, you try to make up for in different ways. Like I say, you drive them to the culture. If something's happening over north or over south or somewhere in St. Paul, just to socialize them, so that they're not scared of people who look like them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now try doing that now from St. Cloud.
Where I live.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
The level of difficulty goes up a level on all that. What's interesting too is people wouldn't know this if you don't live here. Sharif, I know Philly is real different than what we got going on here. But, we're as far north as you get, right? Like I joke that we are Southern Canada, right? Like in a lot of ways, right? In the United States.
Right.
And I think with that comes this sense of it's uber liberal. It's the politics are very progressive, supposedly. It's not the Deep South, because supposedly the Deep South is real racism and what we've got going up here. But even what you just said, Stokley, I mean, first of all, I've watched it change here over the years. And, I learned some things. Like, people don't know about North Minneapolis versus Southwest Minneapolis, just the gross difference between those two places. But then we really don't talk about Northeast Minneapolis, which is where Black folks never used to go there.
Right.
Like, but that was a place where you would get on the wrong bus and get off the bus stop over in Northeast Minneapolis. And you would instantly be told, you need to get back on the bus and go back to the other side. Now, this is the North. This is Minnesota.
Sounds like Northeast Philly used to be.
Yeah. Well, no, nothing's as crazy as Philly, Sharif. I mean, nothing is
crazy. Northeast Philly used to want to secede. They tried to legally secede from Philadelphia.
Wow.
Yeah, they were like, y'all too Black and brown. We're gonna, it's very, very hyper white. Now it's changed. But when I was younger, they were petitioning to become their own, county. They were like, we're out of here.
Wow.
Philly is, yeah.
What's interesting is, Sharif, I watch you model, like you grew up as Black Panther, right? You were a Cub. You had that lifestyle. You had that kind and like grounding. Yeah,
Stokley,
like Stokley,
talking, I'm like, remember the same life. Yeah,
like,
it resonates deeply.
Yeah. And you're doing a good job of recreating that for your
Well,
family
I'm a
and your
very
household?
watered down version of my parents. I can tell you that. Like
We all
very
are.
watered down
Yeah,
We all
version.
are. And thank God, in some ways, thank God.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I grew up thinking like, oh my gosh, my parents are such radical extremists. And then when I got older, I'm like, oh no, they were normal. That's the normal barometer for family, parents, communities trying to protect their Black children.
That's right.
You know, in this context in society, like I see it so normal. And now I feel like, you know what, I am subpar because I'm not, you know, I'm not.
Man.
I mean, they were so, as you said, Stokely, like focused, laser focused. Like that's what they were. Like when you said that, I was like, that's exactly. They were vigilant about protecting our psyche, our brains. You know, physical, like everything. They were just hyper vigilant about it, and they had a community to do it together, right? And it's like that unification. I mean, they had co-ops with food.
Oh,
you know, they were
man.
making their own everything from making their own granola, going to the you know, we would go to the well and we would only drink water from the spring. Like, I mean, it was just like everything, gardening in the backyard to now I'm just like, yo, Uber Eats. Like I did, like, you know what I mean? Just
that sounds like too much work. That sounds like too much work.
But it was normal.
It was normal though. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Wow, that is
so many were doing that. So many.
Wow.
I mean, I knew more people who were living like that than those who I did.
Yeah. True.
But they used to mess it up. So, you know, listen, I kind of grew up in the same thing. Here's how I'm with y'all. Like, you're describing a big part of my childhood with my surrounding families. In a lot of ways, grandparents were important in my life. They were the most important people in my life. So without them, I wouldn't have had the stories and the connection that made me really think deeper than I would have thought, because I heard their stories and I knew their situation. Then I had my dad, who was very much radical and very much he was knee deep in revolutionary thought, but he was very frustrated by the difference between real life and what he knew, what he was conscious knowing what could be. So that used to bleed over into me. And now me as a parent, right? Like I'm the most Negro-pean parent that you've ever seen in your life when it comes to my own children, because, and you know, part of it is one, because time moved on. And first of all, I don't always know what I'm preparing my children for. I'm definitely not preparing them for what I lived, because that's over, right? Yeah, that's the path. And so I'm looking now, trying to be like, figure it out, you know, like just figure it out, basically. And I'm very laissez-faire with them. But me coming up, like, they ruined it for me. Like, you know, you go see Star Wars. There ain't no Black people in Star Wars. Why are you watching that? Right? You know,
they can't see us in the future. They can't see us in the, you know, in the future.
But meanwhile, everybody was going to Star Wars. And here I am, you know, my dad, well, you got to go watch Bruce Lee. Like, well, why Bruce Lee? Because you got to know how to fight and you can't be white. You know, like, what?
And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's in it. You know, we got a black man in it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Which made no sense to me. I couldn't put the two things together. Like, what's Kareem doing?
Big foot, big tall footprint.
What is he doing here?
Hey, man. Yeah.
So Stokley, I would like to go back and just, here's one thing I'm always interested with a story like yours is, when did you know that you had crossed over? Like, there is a moment of which you are still the Stokley of St. Paul, who is, you know, at Central High or you know, living just a normal, I think, kind of existence. And then there's a moment which you are standing on a stage and you look around and you go, oh, damn, this is like another level upward. When was the moment for you when you kind of knew you had crossed over from having the regular life that people have to, you know, to something different?
Very different.
Very different.
I'll pick one moment because I'm thinking of a couple, but I think this was probably the moment that I said, this is for sure what I'm doing, you know. And I, you know, I'd been playing music. I was working, you know, I've had every job known to man, you know. I always had a temporary job because I need to go and, you know, pop off, do a gig, you know, I can't be anything permanent. Now, I had really good jobs, you know, that paid well, but I didn't want to build my life off of that, you know. So if I had to, like, I used to one of my favorite jobs was like Domino's pizza driver. That was fun, you know. But again, the community guy in me is like, because they would always have like pizzas, like no one had, come back and it's like waste them, throw them away. I was like, y'all throwing these away? I put them in the truck. Like, y'all hungry? If I was whatever deliveries, like, yeah. My friends were like, be right back in about 10 minutes. Give the pizzas away. It's like, yeah, man. So that was a fun job.
Local hero.
Yeah. So like, oh man, you still working at it? Nah, I'm done with that, man. So I had, all these jobs and, so I was doing, gigging musician kind of thing. But I think I got the call to do this, to this guy named George Pettis and playing drums. And he got the slot to open for Whitney Houston on her Moment of Truth tour in Europe. I was 19 going on 20. And that was the moment. Being there, opening. I mean, we went to every nook and cranny. This is when Whitney was at her,
That's
here
nuts.
I am. Yeah.
That's really nuts.
Hanging out with her, singing, at the after parties and that kind of. And having this amazing experience, I got homesick. I didn't even know what that was. I was calling my home, and I remember my pops was like, "He's homesick." I was like, "What do you say? What is?" I didn't.
That's what that feeling is. That's what that's called.
Yeah.
There's a term for that.
The term was like, what? I didn't realize what that was, but it was the first time I'd left home like that, and but it was it was amazing. I learned so much. Culture shock and. I was seeing people who looked like me. And I was finally understanding what Pops would always say. He was like, race is a myth. It's not real. It's like you prove to me that that person is white. Like, what makes you white? Prove me that you're black. What is this like as far as skin color goes? It's like, unless you open your mouth, speak another language, whatever your religion, that's, these is how we, what a culture is. It's like, and I would see people who were, speaking Swiss German and all, but look like me, and I'm like, wow, and all these different. I'm like, this is really a trip, And I had a conversation I remember with here's something that really hit me. I was speaking with this chick, and just she was from Rotterdam. We were in Amsterdam, Rotterdam area, and we were having this conversation. Like, yeah, so where are you from? I was like, yeah, I'm from America. Yeah. She's like, yeah. I said, where are you from? She's like, well, my father's English, my mother's Nigerian, whatever. And I was like, cool. It's like, America. It's like, yeah, I know you're from America. It's like, I said, well, yeah, Minnesota is like in a lot of snow, north. Yeah, but where? Who are you people? It's like, oh. I was like, I don't know. That hit me so hard.
Yeah, where you originally from, brother? Right, Minnesota, but
still,
what's your tribe, man?
Like, yeah,
what's your
I was
tribe?
like, that's when it really. I was like, oh man, and she's like, who are you guys? I was like, and I explained to her, it's like, we are a lost people, trying to find it, So we have all these things that we do to try, and I was desperate for that, trying to like, man. So I was asking all kinds of questions, and I was like, wow. So experiences like that were really just like, it hit me. It's like a ton of bricks, and but it was the most amazing thing. So standing, in those stages in Germany and, in Italy and, Sweden, in Norway, in France, that's, it's all these amazing places is when I was like over and over. I was like, wow.
And that's at 19?
Yeah, I was 19. 19,
wow.
20. I was 19, 20. I was 19, 20. Yeah.
Wow.
That's wow.
And
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That is absolutely nuts.
What was crazy was after that, every time I would see Whitney and, she'd always had me complimenting things, saying that we got with the band afterwards. I remember with Mint and we had the big hit. I ran into her. She's like, yeah, man, I love the song. Oh my God, man. You're making some money off that too, ain't you? Oh man. But so many people from that tour, that I see still working now, either behind the scenes as directors or choreographers, or it's like, it's amazing to see the where people have landed and how they grew their life. But I would say that was the moment where there was no moment bigger than that. I mean, that was just so impactful. So when I got home, I was like, man, this is, And at the time, the guitar player from Met, Homer Odell, shout out to OD, we went to the same high school, and we were in the steel drum class, which was an amazing experience. It was my second father, Cliff Alexis Sr., who ran the class, rest in peace. And we had already kind of and me and Odell started putting together the infancy stage of what we wanted to do, and, this band thing. And I got the call to do that. It's like, oh, we can't do the band thing. I was like, oh, no, we're going to do that. I'm going to come back. We just, finish off, and we're going to, I'm going to take this gig, and, but, I was just so that we just had a moment of like, okay, we're really, really doing this. So came back, we got into it, and
it's
rest is history.
Interesting. Like, we get this far into the conversation, and this is on purpose, but we didn't talk about Mint Condition all the way up to this point. And that's on purpose. Really, that's on purpose, because everything that we just talked about is actually the real story, right? So like, for people listening and people watching, right? Mint is it's a part of the journey, a big part. It's a huge part of the journey. Yeah. But I think because I'm from here, and because I have always marveled at your father, and have just marveled at it. Like, how does a person become that rooted and grounded and just confident and sure of himself and what he knows and whatnot? Yeah. That was the world I was in. Even though music was something I thought that I loved about here or whatnot, the real kind of El Khati's kind of like way of seeing the world or whatnot is what I was deeply interested in studying, right? But you get to Mint Condition, right? So for people listening or whatnot, we start out with Stokley Williams, Stokley the St. Paul person, Stokley the Afrocentric offspring, and Stokley the father now. But then we get to Mint Condition, right? And the moment that I say that, what's so funny? This is what's so crazy is. And I've told this to my son who works with you. I'll be somewhere else in the country, and I'll hear y'all all the time everywhere I go. I'll hear y'all in department stores, right? It'll be like, well, damn, that's Mint Condition, right?
Look at that.
Which is amazing. But I would love to know just a little bit what was behind the Mint story, and the craziest thing that I thought about y'all at the time, and this is always just listen from the outside looking in, was that you were one of the only, Mint Condition was one of the only band of instrumentalists, a band of like real musicians. Kind of like the time had been at one point, which you could have put the time behind any other group, and Prince did. He put them behind Vanity Six. They could be the band for anybody because they were instrumentalists. They weren't joking, right? Some of your contemporaries, and I'm not going to ask you to name names, but some of your contemporaries were not necessarily bands full of instrumentalists. Some of them have really good makeup. And I used to see some of them on the bus at different times. have an international hit, and then I see you on the bus with all your hair and your makeup and you're coiffed out and everything or whatnot. But they weren't all necessarily doing what y'all do, like where you're up front, you're singing, and then you go sit back behind the drums. And man, y'all were tight. Anyway, so I would love to know, not to fanboy out on it, but just to hear a little bit about the Mint story, because that one I think is like so foundational to your story.
Oh, for sure. And in that basic start, that's like what you see is what you want to be. And at that time, it was about big bands, horn bands, Brass Construction, Ohio Players, Earth, Wind and Fire, even the groups like but the great horn bands, Chicago, all these big horn bands like that, But as far as the Black community, that's what we saw. It was like, man, that's what was happening then. And then, years went on and the groups got smaller and smaller, and then became, more cost efficient to become just a vocal group. So when we came along, we were still, actually bands were on their way out, and we were still doing what we do. There was Tony. But then we came in together. But then you had this group from Carolinas, Jodeci, Boyz II Men, Philly. You know what I mean? So, and they found out, you can move much cheaper, just with 4 mics, and then people were doing tracks at the time. It's like, oh shoot, promoters can make more money doing that. They don't have to there's no overhead, there's no backline with amplifiers and drums and keyboards and blah 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 blah. So. But we kept that integrity, and it was, we got caught up in a little bit of that. We understand because it was, art versus commerce, and we've always had, that's the age-old discussion.
Right.
It's art or entertainment, you know. And so we would try to basically mix the two together, you know. And that's what we saw. So, you know, we were just a product of that time, and everybody coming at that time. That's what was going on. You know, we were in this really, it was an awkward position, but it was just a very unique position. We were definitely in Island. You know, we were only band after, you know, Tony's, you know, stopped recording, the only band out at that time. And, you know, we would do all these hip hop shows, you know, like Cameo up in the Bay Area, which is, you know, and because up in the Bay Area, there's two places that really helped put us on. That was in the DMV, you know, DC, Virginia, Maryland area, and Bay Area. Those two places where they just locked in, and it's been a love affair ever since. And so they have all these hip hop, you know, all the rappers come in, all these groups, and then we were the one band that they would have, you know, because that was at the time, that was, you know, how you go to a club and they're playing all this, you know, up-tempo music. And at the end of the night, everybody's leaving and they played a couple ballads. We'd be that one ballad that they play, or two, you know, so it was that impact. Yeah, it was that impactful.
You just don't know how people wait for that song now. Like they wait for that song, like it's the moment. They're like, they can't help themselves. They're like, yeah. You know, let's get to it. And then when the moment happens, you feel like people are going to explode. You feel like
I sing that to my daughter sometimes. You know what I mean? Like it's
yeah, man. It's a beautiful
That's a song that makes you think that you can sing even when you can't.
Hey, and
that's a song where you be in your car, you just be like, you know, trying it. You be trying to do it. You forget that Stokley can sing. You just like,
it don't matter. Be trying to mimic. It's express yourself. That's what it's for, man. Sing along, and it, you know, it resonates literally with you inside your body, so that, you know, so that you can do it. So, I mean, that's what it's for. So, yeah, but we, you know, it was just it was a magical time, man. So many things were happening, and we came together, like it's in St. Paul Central High Schools, where we all went to at different times, and we all were in something called the Magnet Arts program, and that was kind of like LaGuardia Center for the Arts, you know, in New York. There, you know, there was acting class, there was, you know, they had this recording studio which we're involved in, and heavily involved in the steel drum orchestra, which, you know, like I said, I call him my mentor, my teacher, second father. He kind of helped raise me as well. And the little bit of theory that I do know musically, he really helped put that stamp on me, you know, classic West Indian brother, you know, and it was pretty strict, but he didn't hold his tongue, you know, and that's why we all loved him. He had a really unique way of teaching. And so much that I took a 2-hour block. I mean, it was just, you know, it was just, you know, it wasn't just, it was life lessons. And here it is, this guy, he just was this international experience and really connected to his Africanisms, you know. So me and Odell from Mint, again, were in that class, and he's coming from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which he was coming from another steel drum orchestra up there, 21st Century Steel Band up there. We get together, and I found out he plays guitar, and I was like, oh, okay. So we start messing around with another cat who played bass, and, you know, just kind of jamming, which is, you know, what cats do when they first find out somebody else plays. And, you know, I think Prince and Andre Simone had a similar story when they were going in Minneapolis Central. And so,
Morris.
We're involved, you know, so we were involved in the steel drum class. We were involved in the studio. And by the way, Odell is like a natural engineer. I learned more from, you know, him about hooking up stuff than I did the actual instructor of the class, you know, because of course, with how tight we were, you know, he was, you know, just telling me and share things. And this is how you hook this up and blah, blah, blah. I was like, how do you just know that? He just was natural. You know, he understands, you know, the ins and outs, how the ebb and flow of everything. So met him, and then we kind of kept playing together in these different, you know, iterations of Mint, I guess. And we met Lawrence Wydell, who's playing for the Steels, amazing family singers at the time, who's another school for me, where I played for a while. You know, Gerald and Javita, JD and Fred. And that was just, he was playing for them. and he saw us, it's like, man, you guys are great. So he joined along. And at the time, too, this guy, Roger Troutman's son lived here,
What?
Roger Lynch. So and he was like, oh man, he was like 12, 13 at the time. So he joined.
Sharif, you look confused. You got to know who Roger is, right?
Roger Troutman was more bounced down. He had this. He's the guy who had the tube, the talk box.
Yeah,
and he would have to play keyboard, and there was the tube, and I
heard it through the grapevine. Like, okay. Yeah. Okay. Computer love,
really unique. Yeah. Wow. So
computer love.
Okay. Yeah. So his son was just uber talented. Really young, played every instrument, sang, and all these different things, and so we became the group, and a couple other guys from high school, and there was another guy from Milwaukee at the time. So we became Mint Condition, and started. Our first gig was Pete and Kim Rhodes Black Musicians Awards out at the place called the Carlton Celebrity Room at the time, which is now exactly where the Mall of America sits.
Oh wow!
And so they used to have used to have it every year, Black Musicians Awards. So they had, I liken it to, it would be like it was the White Award show, which was like they had. I can't remember who was there. It was a lot of stuff that Husker Du at the time. The
Replacements.
Amazing group. Yeah, Replacements, all these different.
Sonic Youth, probably.
Yes, yeah. And then they had all the folks that we knew just to kind of give us a platform because we weren't getting a platform with it. And so we performed and, one night there, and that's where it was born, 1986.
Now, the lore is that you were discovered by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Is that true?
So what's funny, and I always tease Terry about this, at the time, we had that first gig in 86, we were managed by a lady named Sylvia Payne. Sylvia is the brother of Andre Simone. And Sylvia not managed, but she managed us, but she also made clothes for Prince at one time and Andre. Matter of fact, the famous trench coat, I think she came up with that, Prince's purple thing, and so she made these controversial outfits that you can still find online. It was crazy. And that was the moment. And Terry Lewis was in the audience at that show. And I remember our management, asked him after the show, so what'd you think of the group? What'd you think of the band? He's like, well, they need work. So, I told everybody, that sounds like me. And so, fast forward like a couple years, basically, we had another showcase at First Avenue. And that's pretty much what we did. We did showcases and special events and, outside festivals. We weren't a cover band. For some reason, we just loved to do our own stuff. We didn't like playing anybody else's stuff,
Which would have made you very different then. That would have made you very different back then.
Yeah, we were, like I said, we were an island from jump, and I think probably the influence of like making tunes up and discovering, the whole studio thing. Because the studio thing for me, I wasn't really singing in groups. I'd sing background, that kind of thing. I was playing drums and, background. I had no intention of singing, I was fine back there, doing a little hoot, boop, de boop in the background. And
it turns out you can sing.
It turns out my mimicking from all the, listen to James Brown and, the guy vocally, or, say did it for me is Al Green.
Oh, wow.
Mimic him. I was a great mimicker, so I can mimic anything that I can hear. It's like Earth, Wind and Fire, and I hear Stevie, I hear Ella Fitzgerald, and sound like a horn and all these things, things that I continue to do to this day. And that's what did it. But I didn't really know, my aunt was a MD at the church, so I played in church. So I was listening to singing and feeling the spirit, and I was downloading all this information, and absorbing all this energy, right? From the culture again, everything's still connected. Now I'm not knowing all these connections are happening. I'm just doing it, but it's my surroundings. And so I'm playing in church, not singing, and it just became a part. I'm looking at all the energy, and I realized that, now this is nothing but the Black church. You got the preacher in the congregation. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. Hey, and you look at it, that's pretty much what pop culture is right now. When you look at it, you have no idea you are doing the Black church. You know what I mean? They have no idea. They're mimicking the whole, say, all that. All it is like, can I get an amen? You know what I mean? So we are continuing our path with this Mint thing, and we go to First Avenue, we invite Prince's people out. We invite Jam and Lewis. I think there was a rep from MCA Records at the time there. And I remember, we get done. And we used to start the show off with Pretty Brown Eyes. Again, nobody knew the song. It was
at
just
the beginning. At the beginning.
With a ballad, but it was just so, and mind you, we weren't really a ballad band. Everything was just a high energy, up tempo kind of thing, But as one of the guys from Living Color, the rock band would say, it's like, Mint Condition isn't, people got it wrong. You guys are really a rock band. Because we carried that energy inside of that. We became something else because it hit. It was like, okay, let's carry that path, and became good at it. But, at bottom, we were really we had all this energy. So that's why a lot of the songs sound the way they always have this certain kind of energy that's, what you send me swinging had an energy to it, what kind of man had it. So it was just this certain kind of rock and roll, just this, we call it fat back on. You hear that box. It had that kind of thing to it. So there's always a little bop to it because of that contained energy. And so we did the gig at First Ave, and I'm walking to my car, I see Jam and Lewis, and like, hey, Stoke, good job. I'm like, hey, how you doing, man? We'll talk next week. I was like, okay. At that time, we'd heard so much. I was like, okay, I'll believe it when I see, that's great. I'm glad that they came out, and weeks later, we're in Flight Time Studios. They're like, what do y'all want to do?
Wow.
Sure, well, we would like to produce half the album if we could, and them understanding, coming from a band, they knew what that was. They're like, well, you can do the whole damn thing if you want to. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, wow. We were expecting, tight, holding on to the reins. It's, no, you can't do this. And, we heard the stories of Prince and being really controlling and that whole thing. They're like, no, we get it. We were a band. We're y'all, and, you guys continue the tradition kind of thing. So.
And they probably got it more than anybody did. They probably got that more than because of their experience, right?
Absolutely. So they still got
you were in good hands. You were in
good
really
hands,
good hands,
and really good dudes, man. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, I know we're coming to the hour to time here, and I do really appreciate this discussion. I do want to give you kind of like a hard time about one thing. Just it's not a hard time, but really, right? Because I'm looking at your resume here, right, and it says Janet Jackson. Wow, damn. Sounds of Blackness. Damn, wow. Johnny Gill. Wow. Elton John, Prince, Tony Braxton, Kelly Price. I mean, come on. And Color Me Bad. And Color Me Bad. So, bruh, help me know
what's going on here.
Well, yeah, what's going on? Ooh, like
what's that Sesame Street skit? Like, one of these things just don't belong
like the
here.
other.
One of these things is not the same.
We got to thank Color Me Bad, because without Color Me Bad, and a lot of people that came through Flight Time, I was, we were fortunate enough at that time, they were, Jam and Lewis were producing everybody and their mom at that time, everybody was coming through there that you can imagine. So I was like, I guess, the residential drummer, percussionist. I was able to get on a lot of background tracks. And so all those people you mentioned is, in one way, form, or fashion, I was present, on so a lot of those records. And Color Me Bad was a group, and we did a song that was rejected. And then, but we really loved it. It was a song that Odell spearheaded. The song was called So Fi. We went and reworked it. So we worked it like band style. So the song that you hear, when you go listen to So Fi now, that was a Color Me Bad song we did for Color Me Bad. We went in and said, like, let's really gritty it up a little bit more and make it more band style. And that's how that came to be. So without them, we wouldn't have had that song. You know what I mean?
That's the song you did for them.
Yes.
Initially.
Okay. Yeah. Well, listen, and we said this at the beginning of the show, you're still so healthy. You're still so vital. You have survived beyond everybody else, right? And you must look around sometimes at some of these cats that are still doing shows and realize that you are a step apart from many, like you kept moving forward. And it must be that crazy diet that you're on that we talked about in the beginning of this and all of that. But man, you're rare, you're unique, and keep on keeping on, because
thank you.
I just don't think there's another you. It's such a rare story, right?
I'm just trying to share what I am, and part of it, I have nothing to do with it. I'm just trying to preserve what I know and who I am, and spread it. That's all I can do, man. Yeah.
Look, and shout out to the Black educators that you referenced, including your parents, your teachers who poured into you. Special shout out to your parents who, there are many households. If that kid would have touched something, some art on the wall and started playing on it, it might have been held over, right? Like, but
Right.
the opposite of that, you were encouraged,
Right.
So it reminds me of that George Benson song. I know people think Whitney created it, but George Benson, the greatest love of all. Teach them and let them lead the way, right? Like, you're talking about Afrofuturism. The whole idea is teach them well and let them lead the way, not teach them well to make them stand behind you until you feel like you're passing the baton.
Right.
Give it to them and let them lead. Let the children lead. Let the youth lead. So when you shared that just you were able to take it down, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, he's teaching, he's giving me insight about what he has within, and then he's going consulting with somebody. Hey, like, to me, that's such a beautiful genesis to all this. And I think just lessons to remind us, because so many children just hear commands and demands.
Oh man, that's such a great point.
And prohibitions,
That's such a great point, man. Because I think about I don't know how they tolerate. I mean, every band I played was pretty much rehearsed in my parents' basement. I don't know how they tolerated. I mean, it was a lot of noise, and it's so funny to hear my dad talk. I tease him now. He's like, man, I remember some years later, he's like, man, no, what band was that last night? Yeah. It's like, oh, that song, whatever, some lovely music. I was like, wow. Yeah, but I props to them, because it's like, wow, you're absolutely right. Some people are like, turn that slack down. You know what I mean? It's like, wow. And that stifled, no telling what that could be.
The creativity and just the confidence, the creativity, the exploration, the experience, experimenting. That's so much a part of like what education and learning is. But if we're told don't move, stay in that box, where do you practice creativity, right? So.
And I'll say this, like the bongos being on the wall and being able to take them down. First of all, them being on the wall is kind of like the people with the couches that had coverings on the couches, right? Like, don't sit on my good couch, don't touch my good couch type of thing, right?
Right. Don't bring out the good china, right?
Yeah.
Not for these people.
No. When do you use it? Like,
when I said earlier that I'm like a laissez-faire parent, I'm a laissez-faire in this way. When it comes to the bongos on the wall, what I feel like you do is you make your house well stocked with things, possibilities, books, and in my house we have cameras. My kids could take a lot off the shelf and go do something, especially when they're bored. So let them be bored, and then let them have access to things that they can go off and go do something with, especially creative things, and they will find it. They will find a way.
It's a different type of maker space, right? Like, it's a different type. It's in the house. It's just go create, explore,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's how they'll find their thing. That's how they'll take the bongos off the wall and realize that they can drum in patterns, right?
Absolutely.
Now you can try and make them do that and put them in piano classes like we did. Right. No, you're going to take piano. And they hated the whole thing.
I know.
It's like an expensive boondoggle. So
that's tough. Yeah. Yeah.
We appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. That's great.
And you can come back anytime. We know that you're going to have more music coming out, more things that you're doing. What's next for you too? For people that want to see you, what's next for you?
I'm actually in production for the next thing. I'm always recording, but it's got dates coming for the summer and whatnot. Always doing auditions for, it might be plays, television, movies, all kinds of stuff. So that's never really left me, because I done at least one production very early on, Penumbra based production. So it's all in the wheelhouse, man. I'm just trying to get a little dust off and see what I can do. I want to have all the experiences that I could possibly have in life, so that I can do, and try to develop more. So try to learn some more languages if I can, so and then hop back on that train. So might as well, if I'm traveling, I like always to crack that code and speak the language of wherever I'm at. So yeah, bro.
Well, I appreciate you, man. so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
It makes me a little tired to think like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go learn some other languages, and I'm just gonna, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. But
it makes me realize I don't know English when I do that. I'm like, oh, man, it's crazy. Yeah.
But we appreciate you as a great example, especially for our show when we talk so much about Black education and what it means to get a uniquely Black education, to be prepared for the world and inoculated from the things that the world will throw at you. So for people listening, this has been a talk with Stokley Williams, known better as Stokley, whose last album was Sankofa, and we'll have, I'm sure, new music coming out. So keep following the story, follow the thread. And as always, this has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you're still not free, but hopefully you are freer after this hour with all of us together. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you all so much for listening and for watching.